Well, this is a personal log, which means the topic is one I chose for myself because, well, I'm just in the mood to talk about it. At times when I examine the family tree, I'm struck with the magnitude of the damage or pain or suffering that has existed within my own family. Wow, it goes back generations. My great-grandfather grew up at the time of the Civil War. His father was involved in all of that, and the amount of hatred and pain and suffering, and the worst war this country has ever known. Well, then he went right into the era of decimating Indian populations in 1880 and 1890 and trying to survive on nothing. Then my grandfather went to World War I. Well, it was 18 million people died in that savage war in Europe. My father, World War II, Korean War. Wow, that was a tough one. And then, not to mention the American tragedy of the Vietnam War, and it goes on and on and on. I just look at the tragedy of all that and I wonder, how does my system, who basically receives the epigenetic influence of the stress factors of my grandparents, and they all arrive inside of me somewhere. No wonder it's kind of busy in there. I really begin to wonder about it at times. On some practical levels, let me just explain some little pieces of the information that I have just a little feeling about. Because what happens many times are things I don't really comprehend. But I'm going to share with you what I found a little bit, and you can deal with it or not. This is my father. Well, that's his name anyway. This is father's mother and her parents. Whenever there's a difficulty between a father and his mother, this line begins to destroy many things relative to digestion, the bones, and a whole bunch of other things about assimilation, really. Then, if there's a difficulty between this grandmother and her parents, well, this happens to be the place where the memories of the immune system are stored. Well, by the way, the immune system is one very powerful system. This is where all of the difficulties of the very popular faddish things around allergies or candida or all those little things that they say are basically the reason why we're having a problem. Oh, be careful of the gluten or this or that or whatever the problem is, that's the fad of the day. If there's a difficulty between my grandmother and her father, boy, this is a big place. This represents the brain, that could be important, and the central nervous system. Wow, there's a lot of things along here. This is a powerful place to be involved in. When there's a damage here, it causes seizures and convulsions in the great-grandchildren. There's a whole variety of things it does with all kinds of damage to the central nervous system functions and regulating all forms of movement. Now, if this guy right here is not happy, he can throw lightning bolts at the heart, which is called a heart attack or stroke in another part of the body. This is a powerful place. That's my father's family, and we've just begun to scratch the surface of what might be possible there. How many memories do they have? Wow, I can't even begin to count them all. Over here, this is my father's father. This happens to be the place of passion and fire. And if he didn't like his own father, well, wow, I'm in trouble with something about my own blood, my appendix, and my gallbladder. Well, you name it, there's a whole series of things that happen here when my blood doesn't want to be happy with my heart. All kinds of things that happen with my grandfather's relationship to his father. This happens to be the heart. Well, how important is that one? Right next to it is the liver function. This happens to be assimilation. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that happen here. Well, I won't even begin to go into all of it, but when you start to look at all of the symptoms that can happen, you realize that, quite frankly, it's the unresolved relationship trauma in my own family tree that's affecting me. I mean, I don't know about you, but If I look at my own family, it's not always a sweet picture when you start looking back last generation, the other generation, great-grandparents, pain, suffering, divorce, wow, all kinds of stuff. But look at this for a second. On this side, this is the mother's family. Mother's father, by the way, regulates everything that moves in my breath. Gee, that's pretty important. What happens here if she doesn't have a relationship with her own father, for whatever reason? He left, she hates him, whatever. There is a collection of pain and suffering and sadness that now begins to compound the difficulties in one's own breathing. All of this relates up to the function of the pineal or the skin. This leads into asthmatic functions or panic or night terrors, wet cough, dry cough, metabolic disorders, and on and on and on. OCD functions, bipolar functions, they all kind of rest up there. You want to deal with difficulties over here. This is the kidney function, everything related to the bladder. But oh yes, the feminine tract is over here. Wow. Is that an important place? Yeah, I believe it is. The bowels, pancreas. Well, come on, these are all very important functions. And whatever the tragedies were on my father's side of the family, it's always fair. This is an equation, and this side has a mirrored reflection of that side. So this is a giant chaos. Look, I don't mean to draw bleak pictures, but I'm trying to say something simple. We can't really change something if we can't accept the responsibility for its current condition. We can't just be, Pollyanna types and shove it all under the carpet and try to say nice and forget all that and let's just move ahead, right? Sorry, we carry it all with us. Sometimes, I feel like the soul is like Superman being born with kryptonite in his hands. Then he stuffs it in his body and you go, Clark, Clark, give up the kryptonite, let it go. Has no idea how to do that. So how do we get rid of the kryptonite? How do we ever deal with all the stuff that's really there? Okay, wait, not quite done with the tough stuff. Now comes the juicy stuff. Imagine this for a moment. This just happens to be your father and his parents. Now I've seen numerous situations like this. These two families right here, well, they are not yet genetically related. Soon to be, because the marriage of my father's parents, well, it's going to lead down to me. It's going to be a very important part of me. That's called family tree, right? That's how it works. Now in this situation, what happens if my father's mother, which is the bride, she just basically is hated by her mother-in-law? This pattern here of the daughter-in-law and the mother. Now let's be honest for a moment. Is there any person more vilified in society than the mother-in-law? Okay, maybe the stepmother occasionally, but the mother-in-law, we're talking about pretty difficult stuff. So if one of these two don't actually, like each other, if they engage in some kind of hatred-oriented relationship, for whatever justifiable reason they want to do that, this unresolved pattern of pain and suffering, it takes one of these patterns down here, which, by the way, happens to be the ascending and descending forces of all the things that keep my body moving. Oh yeah, I know, it's not written in your science books, but geez, what do they know anyway? So what happens if there's a hatred here? What if this grandmother doesn't like her daughter-in-law, but this is all of the life force related to how to heal my body? That's right. That line has a lot to do with how to restore health in the body. So we go all the way back to the Civil War, but the hardest one are the relationships between people. Now what would happen if my father's father basically didn't get along at all with his stepfather? This relationship here, what if they just... I'm sorry, am I drawing a kind of a dark picture of the family tree? Well, yeah, I believe that first we have to back up and say, look, let's stop just talking sweet about the whole family and accept the responsibility that not only has it been severely damaged in the past by all kinds of difficulties, but it is still continuing. Then, of course, you know that at least 50%, or is that 60% of all marriages, well, they don't work and they break up. Then what's the common dialogue if, you know, my father's father divorces his wife and his mother says, yeah, well, that nasty old girl, I didn't like her. And then now all that dialogue of pain and suffering, and here comes a new wife or two. And some of this pattern goes, and what happens 2 generations later when, you know, you pick up the package and, well, there's your kryptonite. You who have a powerful soul, well, you are just now subject to the unresolved genetic influences or epigenetic influences. Who knows about all this stuff? This stuff is going on, and it's, well, quite frankly, it is capable of just causing all kinds of difficulty. I don't mean to draw a hopeless picture. Get the picture right, and we have the capacity to be able to say, yo, Superman, drop the kryptonite. Back away from the kryptonite. On this side, the mother's family. Well, we could go through the same dialogue of the mother-in-law and the father-in-law and their kids and all the broken messages, and oh well. This is kind of what I'm looking at. How do we honestly, and with some degree of truth, clearly accept the responsibility that even though we might feel that we're wonderful and beautiful and healthy and happy, we're only living at a small fraction of what we truly are. Are we going to accept being a small fraction of the kryptonite man? Or are we going to do something that basically learns how to be able to change this by being willing with clear intentions and clear feelings to be able to restore our true potential in the world? That's how I see the family tree. Some of you already know this, and those of you who've never met me before, well, you just got an earful of something different. All right, now, go ahead. Have a good day. See you again.